The right heel was on. The left one was still in my hand. And from the front hallway, I heard Diane's key scrape against the lock almost 2 hours before she was supposed to be home. For a second, I honestly forgot how to breathe. I was standing in our bedroom in a cream blouse I'd spent 10 minutes trying not to wrinkle, a navy skirt that fell just below my knees, and a shoulder-length brown wig that looked decent from the front as long as I didn't turn too fast. My lipstick was too dark. My hands were shaking so badly I'd missed one earring completely. And the top drawer of my dresser was hanging open like it had finally decided to testify against me. Inside it were the things I had kept hidden from my wife for 43 years. A padded bra, a silk scarf, 2 pairs of tights rolled inside each other, a cheap velvet jewelry box, a compact, a powder brush, and underneath all that, a life I had spent more than half a century pretending wasn't mine. The front door opened. I heard Diane set her purse down on the little table by the stairs, the same way she always did.
Keys, purse, shoes.
A small sigh. Routine. Familiar. Normal. All the sounds of our ordinary life. And there I was in the middle of the one truth. I had never let touch any of it. I could have ripped everything off. I could have shoved the drawer closed. I could have locked myself in the bathroom and come downstairs in sweatpants and another lie. Instead, I just stood there, one heel on, one heel off, staring at the bedroom door like a man waiting for a sentence.
Tom, she called.
My mouth went dry. She was early, because her sister's doctor appointment had been moved. I found that out later. In that moment, all I knew was that the universe had finally gotten tired of helping me hide. Tom. She was coming up the stairs. There are moments in life when you understand, with painful clarity, that whatever happens next is going to divide your life into a before and an after. That was one of them. Not when we got married. Not when our first daughter was born. Not when I retired. Not even when we buried my father. It was the moment I heard my wife's footsteps outside our bedroom while I stood there dressed in a version of myself she had never seen. The door opened. Diane looked in. And I watched the face of the woman who had slept beside me for 4 decades stop recognizing the man in front of her. She didn't scream. That's the part people always imagine wrong. She didn't drop anything. She didn't stagger backward. She didn't start crying right away. The first thing that happened was much smaller and somehow much worse. She blinked. Just once. Like her mind had to refocus because what it was seeing didn't fit anywhere. Her eyes went from the wig to the blouse, to the heel in my hand, to the open drawer, then back to my face. Her lips parted a little, but she didn't say a word. I think I whispered her name. I'm not even sure it came out. The room felt painfully bright. You could hear the ceiling fan. You could hear a dog barking 2 houses down. Somewhere outside, somebody was mowing their lawn. The whole world kept moving like this was just another Thursday, and I could feel 43 years collapsing inside my chest. Finally, she said, very quietly, "How long?" Not "what is this?" Not "why?" How long? And that question hit harder than anything else could have because it told me she already understood the worst part. Not the clothes. Not the wig. The hiding. I sat down on the edge of the bed because I didn't trust my knees. I still had that left heel in my hand. I said, "A long time." She kept standing in the doorway, as if the room itself had become unfamiliar territory. "How long, Tom?" My throat hurt. "Before I met you." I don't know what I expected after that. Anger, maybe. Disgust. A slammed door. Something sharp and immediate. Instead, her face changed in a slower, sadder way. It was the face of someone doing math they never wanted to do. Before I met you. 43 years of marriage. 2 daughters. A mortgage. Sunday dinners. Road trips. Funerals. Christmas mornings. Hospital waiting rooms. Inside jokes. Arguments about paint colors and lawn fertilizer and whose turn it was to call the plumber. And under all of it this. Her eyes dropped to the drawer again. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should have bought a better compact. Like somehow the cheapness of it made me look more pathetic. She asked, "Do the girls know?"
No.
Anyone?
No.
You've been doing this here? In this house? I nodded. She shut her eyes for a second. That was the moment I thought she might leave. But she didn't. She stepped back into the hallway and said, "Please get changed." That word, please, nearly broke me. Because it wasn't rage. It was hurt trying very hard to stay polite. After she went downstairs, I sat there for another full minute with one shoe on and one shoe off, looking at my own reflection in the mirror. I didn't look glamorous. I didn't look elegant. I looked like a 67-year-old man who had spent a lifetime learning how to disappear inside embarrassment. I took the wig off first. Then the earrings. Then the blouse. By the time I came downstairs in jeans and a gray sweater, Diane was at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She wasn't drinking. She didn't look up right away. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was crowded. Crowded with every time I had said I was just tired, just doing paperwork, just sorting tools in the garage, just not ready to come to bed yet. Crowded with every weekend she'd gone to visit her sister, every errand that bought me 2 secret hours, every package I'd intercepted before she got to the mailbox. I sat across from her. For 43 years, I had imagined this conversation in every possible version except the real one. She asked, "Do you want to be a woman?" I answered too fast. "I don't know." It was the most honest thing I had said all day, and maybe the first honest thing I had said about this in my whole life. She finally looked at me. I said, "I know I'm a man. I know I'm your husband. I know I love you. I know I never wanted to leave you. I know I never did anything with anyone else. I know this wasn't about replacing you. But if you're asking me whether this part of me ever fully went away, no, it didn't." Diane's jaw tightened. 43 years. I know. You let me stand beside you for 43 years without telling me who you were. That sentence sat between us, and I had no good defense against it because there wasn't one. The truth is, I had built my whole adult life on the hope that silence could count as stability. I didn't start out thinking I was a liar. I started out thinking I could outgrow it. That's what I called it back then.
It.
Never a feeling. Never a need. Never a side of me. Just it. Something embarrassing. Something private. Something I would stop doing once I became more of whatever I thought a man was supposed to be. But I learned early that shame doesn't disappear just because you refuse to name it. It just gets better furniture. The first time I remember feeling it, I was 11. My mother had hung laundry in the backyard, and one of her slips had blown off the line into the grass. I picked it up to bring it inside. That should have been the end of it. Instead, I stood there with that thin, cool fabric in my hands longer than I needed to. Not because I wanted to steal it, not because it was some wild thrill, because something about it felt peaceful. That's the only word I've ever found that matches it.
Soft.
Quiet. Different from the rough, noisy version of boyhood I was being handed every day. My father believed in hard edges. Hard handshake, hard voice, hard rules. He had opinions about men that he never needed to write down because he said them constantly. Men don't fuss. Men don't mince around. Men don't cry unless somebody died. Men don't care what they look like. Men certainly don't touch women's things unless they're carrying them to the car. I heard all of that long before I understood why it made me nervous. By 13, I knew enough to be careful. My mother worked Tuesdays at the library. My father didn't get home until 5:30. If I came home from school and the house was empty, sometimes I would go into my parents' room, open a drawer, and touch things I didn't have words for. A scarf. A pair of gloves. One time, a blouse. The first time I actually tried something on, I remember staring at the bedroom door the whole time, expecting it to explode open. It didn't. Nothing dramatic happened. No lightning. No revelation. Just an odd, terrifying calm. That might sound small, but to a boy growing up in the kind of house I grew up in, calm itself felt dangerous. It meant I liked something I wasn't supposed to like. So I did what scared kids do best. I got secretive. Then I got good at it. By high school, I had convinced myself it was a phase. By college, I had convinced myself getting serious about life would kill it. Then I met Diane, and for a while, I thought love might do what shame and self-discipline never had. It's easy to tell that part as if I used her. I didn't. I loved her almost immediately. Still do. I met her at a church picnic in the summer of 1980. She had a paper plate in one hand and a look on her face like she was already tired of pretending she enjoyed small talk. She wore a yellow sleeveless top and white shorts, and she laughed with her whole head tilted back. Not performative. Not delicate. Real laughter. The kind that made other people turn and smile too. She liked that I listened. That's what she told me later. Not that I was handsome. Not that I was exciting. She said, "You actually listen when people talk. Most men are just waiting for their turn." I had never thought of myself as feminine. That word would have terrified me back then. But I knew I wasn't like a lot of the men around me. I noticed things.
Tone. Mood.
Small changes in expression. When Diane's mother got sick before our wedding, I didn't tell her to stay strong. I sat with her in the hospital cafeteria while she cried into a paper napkin and said almost nothing at all. Maybe that's part of why she married me. I was gentle in ways the world never rewarded, and she felt safe with that. The cruelest part is that I took the one place I felt most loved and turned it into the place where I hid the most. A month before our wedding, I threw out everything. The one pair of stockings I'd bought. A cheap wig. A blouse from a thrift store. Some makeup I didn't know how to use. I dropped it all in a trash bag behind a gas station 10 miles from my apartment because I was afraid someone would see it in my building dumpster. I remember feeling proud that night.
Resolved. Clean.
I told myself marriage would be a reset. Then, about 8 months into our first year, Diane went to spend the weekend with her sister after the birth of her first nephew, and I found myself wandering through a department store I had no business being in, standing too long near the women's clearance rack while pretending I was waiting for someone. I bought a nightgown and a cardigan that day.
That was the first adult lie.
Not the last. Some people imagine secrets as thrilling. Mine mostly felt stupid. I hid clothes in a toolbox under old drill bits because Diane never opened it. I paid cash whenever I could. I learned which thrift store clerks asked fewer questions. I told myself I was being considerate by never touching her things. That mattered to me strangely. I never wanted this to feel like theft from her. If I wore women's clothes, I wanted them to be mine, even if mine meant hidden in the back of a storage bin marked Christmas lights. Then the children came, and secrecy got more complicated. We had 2 girls 3 years apart. Laura first, then Beth. The house was suddenly full of dolls, ribbons, school schedules, pediatrician visits, Girl Scout forms, dance recitals, science projects, forgotten lunches, and those tiny socks that reproduce like rabbits in a laundry basket. There were years when I barely had time to sit down, let alone disappear into private rituals. Those years were easier in one way. Exhaustion does what moral discipline often can't. It leaves you no room. But the feeling never vanished. It waited. Sometimes months would go by. Once nearly 2 years. Then Diane would take the girls to her mother's for a Saturday, and I'd find myself standing in front of that old storage box like it contained oxygen. It wasn't only about the clothes. That's what took me so long to understand. It was the relief. The momentary silence in my own head. The permission to be softer than I let myself be anywhere else. I worked as a service manager at an auto repair shop for most of my adult life. Before that, I turned wrenches. Grease under the nails. Men busting each other's chops before 8 in the morning. Sports radio. Dirty jokes. Toughness worn like a uniform. I wasn't unhappy there, exactly. But I was performing a version of manhood that always felt slightly louder than my real voice. Then I'd come home, mow the lawn, fix the sink, help with homework, make sure the bills were paid, sit through parent-teacher conferences, and be the dependable husband and father everyone knew. And underneath all of that lived a person who only came out in fragments and always with one ear turned toward the door. That's no way to live, by the way. Even when the secret is private, the tension leaks into everything else. You become watchful, careful, a little absent in moments when you should be fully present. The hardest part wasn't wearing women's clothes. The hardest part was becoming a man who always had one sentence prepared in case a drawer got opened. There were close calls. Once Diane found a receipt in my jeans pocket from a department store I never shopped at. I told her I'd gone in to buy a gift for her, then changed my mind. She looked suspicious for maybe 3 seconds, then let it go. Once Beth, when she was 14, almost found one of my wigs and a toad in the attic because she was hunting for old Halloween decorations. Once a package was delivered while I was in the shower, and Diane set it on the kitchen counter. I came out wet and half panicked because the return label had a boutique name on it I couldn't explain. I told her it was a mistake, and I'd send it back. The look she gave me then should have warned me about what secrecy was doing to my face. People may not know the truth, but they know when something around it doesn't add up. Even so, I kept going. Not because I didn't trust Diane exactly. Because I trusted fear more. I knew what generation we came from. I knew the jokes men told. I knew the sermons people nodded through. I knew the easy ways a husband could become a humiliation story told behind closed doors. And if I'm being honest, I also didn't fully understand myself. That's an ugly thing to admit at my age, but it's true. If I had told her at 30, what would I have said? That I liked women's clothes? That they comforted me? That sometimes putting them on made me feel more like myself, and sometimes it made me feel like I was borrowing a quiet version of someone else? That I didn't want to leave my marriage, but didn't want to amputate this part of myself either? That I wasn't sure if it was about gender, or presentation, or softness, or permission, or all of those things mixed up together. I didn't have the language.
I barely have it now.
So instead of truth, I chose management. People who live with secrets become managers. Managers of risk. Managers of timing. Managers of facial expressions. I got older. Technology changed. Online shopping made things easier and more dangerous at the same time. You could browse without standing under fluorescent lights feeling judged by strangers, but packages had to come to the house. Emails had to be deleted. Bank statements had to be watched. Sizing became both a blessing and a disaster. I learned the hard way that buying a dress because you like the neckline means absolutely nothing if the shoulders don't fit. I learned that cheap wigs look cheap in daylight no matter how hopeful you feel at midnight. I learned that heels beyond 2 inches are a terrible idea for a man in his 60s with one stiff knee and an inflated memory of balance. Most of all, I learned that when you're alone too long with something you never speak out loud, it starts to turn theatrical in your head. Without anyone grounding me, I made choices based on fantasy instead of reality. Too much makeup. The wrong colors. Shoes that looked better in pictures than on actual feet. Outfits designed for a 28-year-old I had never been, rather than the older body I was actually living in. That mattered more than I realized. Because if cross-dressing stays trapped in secrecy, it can become less about expression and more about escape. Less about who you are and more about a locked room where nobody can challenge the version you invented. I didn't know that until Diane found me. Sitting across from her at the kitchen table that day, all of my private logic sounded flimsy. I was afraid, I said. She laughed once, and there was no humor in it. You think I'm not afraid right now? That landed. I had spent decades imagining only my side of the fear. She pushed her mug away and folded her arms. I need you to answer me honestly, even if you think I won't like it. I will. Have you ever gone out dressed like that? I shook my head.
No.
Ever? Only in the car once. Years ago. At night. I drove around for 20 minutes and came home. She stared at me. You drove around. I nodded, embarrassed all over again. Did you want someone to see you? I don't know. Maybe part of me did. Mostly, I think I wanted to see if I could exist outside one room. She absorbed that. Then she asked the question I had been dreading since the moment she opened the door. Did you think I'd leave if I knew? I looked at her and said the one answer that contained the whole shame of my adult life. Yes. Diane leaned back in her chair as if I had physically struck her. Not because of the clothes. Because of what that answer meant. That I had decided for her. That I had built an entire secret country inside our marriage and posted myself at the border. We didn't resolve anything that night. I wish I could tell you we talked for hours and found our way back to each other before bed. That would make a cleaner story. Real life was rougher and quieter. She slept in our room. I slept on the couch in the den. At 3 a.m, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling fan, thinking about the way she had looked at me in the doorway. Not disgusted. Wounded. There's something much harder than being rejected. It's being seen as dishonest by the person whose trust matters most. The next morning, Diane was already dressed when I came into the kitchen. Hair pinned up, blue robe over her nightgown, toast on a plate, local news low on the television. Everything looked normal except for the fact that nothing was. She said good morning the same way she always did. That made it worse somehow. We moved around each other, like people learning the floor plan of a damaged house. By lunchtime, I had made a decision. Not a wise one. A panicked one. I went upstairs, pulled the storage bins out of the closet, opened the dresser drawer, gathered every blouse, skirt, scarf, pair of shoes, wig, compact, lipstick, padded bra, and pair of tights I had into 2 black garbage bags and dragged them to the garage. If I couldn't undo 43 years of hiding, maybe I could at least remove the evidence. I had just lifted the first bag into the trash when Diane's voice stopped me. "What are you doing?" I turned around. She stood in the doorway from the laundry room, watching me. Her face was unreadable. I said, "Getting rid of it." "All of it?" "Yes." "Because you want to?" I hesitated. She nodded once, like that answered the question. "So no," she said. I didn't speak. She stepped closer, looked at the overstuffed bag, and then at me. "Don't do this for me if it's just another lie in a different outfit." That sentence has stayed with me ever since. A different outfit. Even then, in the middle of being hurt, she could still cut straight to the center. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I know," she said. "Neither do I." She reached past me, took one of the garbage bags out of the trash can, and set it back on the concrete floor. Then she said something I still wasn't ready for. "I'm angry, Tom. I'm embarrassed that I didn't know. I'm hurt that you didn't trust me. I'm asking myself questions I never imagined asking at 66 years old. But I don't want you performing another version of yourself while I'm standing right here. Not the version that hides it, and not the version that throws it away because he's scared of the consequences." I think I started crying before I knew I was crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just the kind that hits older men the hardest because it makes them feel suddenly 12. Diane looked at me for a long moment, then handed me a rag from the workbench because apparently after 43 years she still knew I'd rather wipe my face with something practical than soft. "Put the bags back upstairs," she said. I did. That afternoon she told me she needed the full truth. Not the short version. Not the embarrassed version. The full one. So I gave it to her. Or, at least as much of it as I could. I told her about being a boy in my mother's room. About my father's voice living in my head decades after he died. About throwing things away before our wedding and buying them again. About the way it felt less like pretending to be someone else and more like resting from being only one version of myself all the time. I told her I had never cheated. That I had never stopped loving her. That there were times I hated this about myself and times I hated myself for hating it. That I knew hiding it had turned me into someone she didn't fully know, and I was sorry in a way that apology couldn't really fix. She listened without interrupting much. When she finally did speak, it wasn't what I expected. "You know what hurts the most?" I braced myself. "It's not that you wore women's clothes. It's that you decided I could share a life with you, but not the confusion you were living with." That may not sound like a devastating sentence to some people. It was to me, because it was true. I had spent decades protecting myself from her possible reaction and never once considered what my silence required from her, a marriage to a man who edited himself so heavily that even his love had missing pages. For the next week, our house felt like a place where a storm had passed, but the furniture was still damp. We were polite. We were careful. We talked in starts. Sometimes Diane would ask a question while washing dishes because eye contact made it easier for neither of us. Sometimes I'd answer too quickly and she'd say, "Don't say what sounds safest. Say what's true." Once, while folding towels, she asked, "Do you have a name when you dress?" I said no. Then, after a few seconds, I used to think about one. What was it? I almost didn't tell her. "Elena," I said. She looked up. "Why Elena?" I gave a helpless shrug. "I don't know." It sounded gentle. She stared at me for a long second, then went back to the towels. That hurts a little too. I flinched.
Why?
Because you were naming parts of your life I wasn't invited into. That was Diane all over. Honest in ways that weren't theatrical. She didn't make herself the villain. She didn't make herself the saint. She just said the thing that was real. A few days later, she asked to see the clothes. Not me wearing them. The clothes. That distinction mattered. I carried everything downstairs and laid it out on the dining room table like evidence. In daylight, most of it looked worse than I remembered. A black dress with a neckline too young for anyone our age. A burgundy blouse made of fabric that clung in all the wrong places. One pair of pumps that would have broken my ankle eventually. 2 wigs, one decent, one absurd. A cardigan I actually still liked. 3 scarves. Jewelry that leaned more hopeful than tasteful. Diane stood there with her reading glasses low on her nose, hands on hips, surveying the hidden inventory of my life. Then, to my complete surprise, she snorted. Not cruelly, just once. I looked at her, stunned. She picked up the black dress between 2 fingers and said, "You've been hiding this for 43 years, and this is what you chose." I actually laughed. It came out shaky, but it was real. That tiny moment mattered more than I can explain. Not because she approved. She didn't. Not yet. But because laughter meant I had stepped, however slightly, out of the courtroom in my own head. She kept sorting. "This fabric is terrible." "I know. These shoes are a hate crime against your arches." I suspected. She held up the wig I knew was bad. "And this one looks like a weather event." I laughed harder that time. So did she, though only for a second before the seriousness returned. Then she said something I still think about. "You've been dressing for an audience that only exists in hiding." I frowned. She set the wig down. "I'm saying none of this looks like you. It looks like what a nervous man thinks a woman is supposed to look like when nobody is around to tell him to calm down." I had never heard the problem described so clearly. That was the first educational lesson hidden inside all this, and it changed more than my wardrobe. When you hide long enough, performance takes over. You stop asking what actually fits your body, your age, your personality, your comfort, your life. You dress for a fantasy, because fantasy doesn't argue. Diane did. And thank God she did. Over the next several days, she asked questions I should have been asking myself all along. What colors do you actually like? What clothes make you feel relaxed instead of exposed? Do you want to look elegant, practical, soft, casual? Are you dressing for how you think women are seen, or for how you want to feel in your own skin? The answers were embarrassingly unclear at first. I had hidden this side of myself for so long that I had never really developed it. I'd collected pieces, not understanding. That's another thing people don't talk about enough. Style isn't just buying clothes. It's self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is hard when your whole relationship to the mirror is secrecy. Diane didn't become my coach overnight. There were still hard moments. Nights when she went quiet. Mornings when I caught her studying me like she was still lining up the husband she knew with the man from the doorway. But something had shifted. Now the truth was in the room. That changes the air. One Saturday, she came back from running errands with 2 department store bags and set them on the kitchen island. My stomach dropped. "What's that?" She took off her sunglasses. "If we're going to talk about this, I'd rather talk about reality than whatever bargain bin panic you've been collecting." I just stared at her. She gestured toward the bags. "Open them." Inside were 3 tops, a knit midi skirt, a pair of low block heel ankle boots, a soft wrap cardigan, and a package of proper shapewear. I picked up the cardigan first. Dusty blue. Simple. Nothing flashy. "It's nice," I said quietly. "It's wearable," she corrected. "There's a difference." Then she added, "And before you say anything, no, this does not mean I'm suddenly fine. It means I'm trying to understand what's real here." That was Diane too. Generous, but not pretending. She had also bought a measuring tape. That afternoon in our bedroom, the same room where she had found me, she stood a few feet away and said, "All right. First, your size is not whatever you wish it was." I smiled despite myself. She measured my shoulders, chest, waist, and inseam with the detached concentration of someone tailoring curtains and emotions at the same time. Your problem, she said, is that you keep choosing things because they're feminine, not because they suit you. That sounds right. Also, these bras are wrong. I figured. No, you guessed. There's a difference. I had spent decades thinking clothing was the transformation. Diane taught me that fit is the thing that changes how you carry yourself. If something pinches, rides up, gapes at the shoulder, or forces your body into tension, it won't make you feel feminine. It'll make you feel disguised. We started with the basics. A properly fitted bra, even with light padding, sat better under a top and immediately changed the line of my body without looking exaggerated. The skirt she bought had movement without clinging. That mattered. It let me feel the shape of it when I walked without turning every step into a self-conscious event. The boots were a revelation. Low heel, stable base. Enough structure that I didn't feel like a colt on ice. Smaller steps, Diane said the first time I tried walking across the room. I looked at her. You're leading with your panic, she said. Stop trying to walk like you think women walk. Just shorten your stride and let your hips move naturally. That sounds simple. It wasn't. It felt like relearning how to live in my own skeleton. Relax your shoulders, she said. I tried. You're bracing like someone's about to make fun of you. That one hit straight through me. Because she was right. Every movement I made while dressed had been shaped by anticipated ridicule. When people talk about confidence, they usually make it sound magical. In real life, it's mechanical first. Shoulders.
Breath. Jaw. Steps.
The body learns safety before the mind believes it. We didn't do makeup that day. That came later. I changed back into my regular clothes afterward, and Diane sat on the bed for a long time without speaking. Finally, I asked, "What are you thinking?" She answered without looking at me. "I'm thinking I'm more angry about the years than I am about the clothes." I sat beside her. She continued, because this, she motioned vaguely toward the closet, the bags, the cardigan, all of it. This I can at least look at. This I can ask questions about. But 43 years of not knowing when my husband was scared or ashamed or lonely because he thought he had to act fine, she swallowed. That's a harder thing to forgive. I didn't argue. There are times when love is best expressed by not defending yourself against the truth. Weeks passed. Then a month. Not smooth, but real. We made rules because real marriages need rules more than speeches. No more hiding purchases. No borrowing her clothes without asking. No secrets in mislabeled bins or drawers. If I wanted time to dress, I would say so. If she felt overwhelmed, she would say that too. There would be no forcing, no testing, no cornering each other into emotional performances for the sake of progress.
It was awkward.
It was adult. It saved us. The first time Diane saw me dressed on purpose, not by accident, it was her idea. She had asked me 3 days earlier, "If I'm ever going to understand this, I need to see you when you're not in the middle of being caught." I didn't sleep much after that. There's a huge difference between someone discovering your secret and someone asking you to reveal it. One feels like punishment. The other feels like standing without armor. I took too long getting ready that evening. Diane knocked once and said, "If you're trying to become 25 in there, it isn't happening." That made me laugh, which helped. When I finally came out, I was wearing the blue cardigan, a cream top, the knit skirt, sheer tights, and the ankle boots. Light makeup this time. Softer lipstick. A better wig. Small pearl earrings Diane had picked from a display because, in her words, you need to stop buying jewelry that looks like it tells fortunes. She was sitting in the armchair by the window. For one unbearable second, I wanted to turn around. Then she looked up. Really looked. Not shocked now.
Seeing.
Her gaze moved over the outfit, the way I was holding myself, the careful face I had put on, the fear I hadn't. I couldn't read her. Finally she said, "Come here." I stepped closer. She stood up and adjusted the necklace chain at the back of my neck because it had twisted. The tenderness of that nearly undid me. Then she stepped back and said something I never expected to hear. "You don't look ridiculous." I laughed once out of sheer relief. She shook her head. "No, you don't." Nervous, yes. A little overdressed for a Wednesday night at home. Maybe, but not ridiculous. I covered my face with one hand, suddenly emotional. She lowered my hand gently. Tom, she said, I need you to listen carefully. I'm still hurt. I'm still confused sometimes. I'm still grieving the fact that this was hidden from me for so long. But when I look at you right now, what shocks me most isn't the clothes. What is it? She held my gaze. How much less tense you look. I don't think anyone had ever given me a more accurate description of what this meant to me. Less tense. Not transformed into another species. Not revealed as someone she never knew. Not theatrically reborn. Less tense. As if the body she had lived beside for decades had finally unclenched. That night we sat together in the living room and talked for nearly 3 hours. About marriage. About fear. About aging. About the strange cruelty of reaching your 60s before realizing how much of your life has been spent bracing against other people's expectations. Diane admitted something too. She said, I used to think your calm was just your personality. But now I'm wondering how much of it was you constantly managing yourself. I smiled sadly. A lot. She nodded. That explains some things. Like what? Like why you always seemed most tired after family holidays. Or why you disappear into the garage after certain conversations with your brother. That made sense. My brother Frank, God love him, is the kind of man who thinks anything softer than a hunting knife is a sign of decline. We both laughed at that. Then Diane asked carefully, Do you want our daughters to know? I looked down at my hands. One resting on a skirt I still couldn't believe I was allowed to wear in my own living room. I don't know, I said. Maybe someday. But not yet. She nodded. Not yet is honest. That's enough. A week later, she did something that scared me even more than being caught. She invited me out. Not to dinner. Not anywhere crowded.
Just a drive.
After dark, she said. To the lake overlook. Hardly anyone goes there on weeknights. I stared at her across the kitchen. You want me to go like this? I want to see if you can. My first instinct was no. My second instinct was also no, just louder. But the thought wouldn't leave me alone. All those years earlier, that lonely 20-minute drive around back streets had been the farthest I'd ever let this part of myself go. Maybe because movement makes things real. That evening I changed 3 times. Too formal. Too obvious. Too much lipstick. Too little. Finally Diane came into the bedroom, took one look at the pile of rejected clothes, and said, You're dressing. Like somebody's going to issue a grade. It feels like they might. She crossed the room, held up a soft charcoal sweater and a simple dark skirt, and said, Wear this. You're not auditioning for femininity. You're trying to leave the house without fainting. I did what I was told. The walk from the front door to the car was maybe 20 feet. It felt like crossing an open stadium. My ears rang. My heartbeat was ridiculous. I kept expecting a porch light to click on, a neighbor's voice to call out, some cosmic referee to blow a whistle and declare the whole experiment invalid. Nothing happened. A moth circled the porch light. Somebody's television glowed behind curtains across the street. Diane unlocked the passenger side and waited. When I finally sat down, she said, Breathe. I hadn't realized I'd stopped. As we drove, every pair of headlights felt personal. Every stop sign felt public. But about 10 minutes in, something odd happened. The world stayed busy with itself. Cars passed. A cashier at a gas station glanced up as Diane paid for bottled water and then forgot us immediately. A couple at the overlook were too busy arguing quietly beside their truck to notice anybody else. The universe, which I had always imagined as a giant jury, turned out to be mostly distracted. That was another lesson I should have learned earlier. When you're terrified of being seen, you imagine other people are experts in your shame. Usually they're just trying to get home before their fries get cold. We stood by the rail overlooking the dark water, not too close together at first. Wind tugged at my wig and I panicked, reaching for it. Diane caught my wrist. Stop fussing with it, she said. It's moving. So is your sweater. So is my hair. It's wind, not a scandal. I laughed, then unexpectedly started crying. This happened to me more in those first months than it had in the previous 40 years combined. Apparently, once the pressure valve breaks, the body keeps receipts. Diane moved closer. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For all of it. She looked out at the water. I know. Then, after a pause, I'm sorry you were carrying it alone that long. I turned toward her, stunned. That sentence didn't erase the hurt, but it was the first time I understood that compassion had entered the room without replacing accountability. Both were there. That's what mature love looks like when it's doing hard work. Not blind acceptance. Not rejection. Not slogans.
Truth.
Hurt.
Curiosity.
Boundaries. Humor. Reluctant tenderness. Repeated conversation. Room for both people to be imperfect. When we got home that night, Diane sat at the vanity and said, "Come here. Your eyeliner is smudged." I came over. She tapped the stool beside her and, for the first time in my life, showed me how to fix makeup without turning it into a renovation project. Less product, she said. Always less than you think. Blend downward into the neck. Powder only where you need it. And if your eyes water, stop pulling at them like you're sanding wood. I laughed. She looked at me in the mirror. I'm serious. That mirror used to terrify me. It had been the site of rehearsal, secrecy, and self-criticism. But sitting beside my wife while she handed me a makeup sponge and complained that my color choices had the subtlety of emergency lighting changed something deep. It made the whole thing human. No longer a forbidden ritual. A skill. An expression. A conversation. She taught me that neutral tones are kinder in daylight. That lipstick looks better when you blot it once instead of layering it until it could survive weather. That wigs sit more naturally with a proper cap. That a neckline matters less than posture. That if your shoes hurt after 10 minutes, they are not confidence shoes, they are punishment shoes. And maybe the biggest lesson of all, femininity is a noise. It isn't excess. It isn't costume jewelry attacking from 3 directions. Sometimes it's restraint.
Ease.
Knowing what to leave alone. Months went by, and our marriage changed in ways I'm still discovering. Not magically. There were setbacks. One night, Diane burst into tears in the middle of folding laundry because she found herself wondering how many anniversaries I had spent smiling across a restaurant table while hiding this from her. Once she snapped at me in a department store parking lot because I asked for her opinion on 2 blouses, and she suddenly felt like I was asking her to skip over the betrayal and go straight to being supportive. She was right. We sat in the car for 20 minutes after that, not driving anywhere. She said, "You don't get to turn me into the instant guide just because I know more about clothes." I apologized. That mattered too. I had to learn that honesty after secrecy isn't just confession. It's patience. You don't reveal a buried room in the house and then get annoyed that everyone needs time to walk through it.
So I slowed down.
I stopped treating every moment of tolerance like permanent approval. I let her ask hard questions more than once. She let me answer differently as I understood myself better. Some evenings I dressed, and we watched television like any other couple. Some evenings I didn't. Some days we didn't talk about it at all. That, strangely, was progress too. It meant the truth had become part of life instead of the entire weather system. One Sunday afternoon, about 6 months after she found me, Diane came upstairs holding an old photo album from the hall closet. "What's this?" I asked. She sat beside me on the bed and opened it to a picture from our 2nd anniversary. We were standing outside a restaurant, both too young to know how young we looked. Diane wore a navy dress with a soft drape and a small silver necklace. I stared at it, and a memory clicked into place so hard it almost hurt. She noticed. "What?" I looked at her. "That's why I bought that navy skirt years ago." Her brow furrowed. "It reminded me of this dress," I said. "Not exactly. Just the color. The way it moved." Diane was quiet a long time. Then she asked, "So some of what you liked in women's clothes was tied to me?" I nodded, embarrassed by how intimate that sounded. "Yes." She looked back at the photograph. "You never told me that."
No.
"You didn't tell me anything." There was still pain in it, but softer now. More sorrow than accusation. I said, "I know." She touched the edge of the photo with one finger. Then she surprised me again. You know, if you told me that at 30, I might have understood less. But I also might have been less angry about the clothes.
Why?
Because then I would have known I was in the room somewhere. That line broke my heart a little, because she had always deserved to be in the room. As the months passed, the most unexpected transformation wasn't in how I looked. It was in how I spoke. I stopped saying this thing. I stopped saying it. I started saying things like, I'd like some time this afternoon, or I feel calmer when I'm dressed that way, or I'm not sure whether I want to be seen or just not have to hide. Those may sound like small sentences. They changed my life. Language turns fog into furniture. Once you can name what you feel, you stop tripping over it in the dark. The first time Diane heard me say, this part of me, instead of that stupid thing, she looked at me carefully and said, you sound kinder to yourself. I answered, I'm trying. She said, good. Shame made enough decisions already. That might be the most useful thing anyone could hear about this topic, whether they cross-dress or not. Shame is a terrible life planner. It doesn't help you choose wisely. It just helps you hide efficiently. The real turning point came on our 44th anniversary. By then, a year had almost passed since the day in the bedroom doorway. Diane suggested we spend the weekend at a small inn in a lakeside town about 90 minutes away. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one knew us. I assumed it was an anniversary trip, and it was.
But not only that.
The second night, after dinner, she sat on the bed and said, I want to ask you something. That sentence still made my stomach clench. All right.
She took a breath.
I've seen you dressed. I've sat with you at home. I've gone out with you in the dark. I've listened to you explain feelings you spent decades burying. But I still don't think I've fully met the version of you that felt he had to live hidden.
I didn't know what to say.
She continued, tomorrow morning, I want us to have breakfast together in this room. No rushing. No whispering. No putting everything away before housekeeping knocks. Just breakfast.
Daylight.
The whole truth. My heart started pounding. In some ways, daylight is more intimate than public. Night forgives things. Morning asks you to stand by them. I barely slept. At 7:30, Diane showered first. Then it was my turn. I took my time getting ready, not because I wanted perfection, because I wanted honesty. I chose a soft rose top Diane had helped me pick 2 months earlier, the blue cardigan, a charcoal skirt, sheer tights, the ankle boots, simple earrings, natural makeup, and the better wig. When I came out of the bathroom, she had already opened the curtains. Morning light filled the room.
No mercy in it.
No mystery either. Diane looked up from pouring coffee. And this time when she saw me, she smiled. Not a dramatic movie smile. Not a triumphant one. A tired, affectionate, slightly watery smile from a woman who had done the hard work of staying in a complicated conversation.
There you are, she said.
3 words. I had hidden for more than 50 years, and those were the words waiting on the other side. There you are. Not who are you. Not what is this. There you are. I had to sit down immediately because my legs gave out a little. We ate breakfast in that small room while sunlight touched every insecure detail I had spent a lifetime fearing. The line of my jaw, the age in my hands, the slight stiffness when I crossed my legs, the not quite perfect wig, the softness of the cardigan, the lipstick that had faded a little after coffee. And Diane watched me the way wives watch husbands when they finally stop pretending not to notice what's been there all along. Halfway through breakfast, she said, Can I tell you what I see? I nodded. I see my husband, she said. I also see someone younger, in a sad way. Someone who learned very early that softness had to be hidden. And I think that's the part one wish I could have found sooner. I started crying again. At this point, tears had practically joined the marriage. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm still not sure I understand every part of this, she said. Maybe I never will. But I understand enough now to know the secret was hurting you. And I understand enough to know that the person sitting in front of me is not a stranger.
He's you.
More honestly than before, maybe. But still you. If you've ever waited decades for one sentence to loosen something inside you, You'll know what happened next. Nothing dramatic on the outside. No swelling music. No perfect ending. Just breath. Deep, full breath. The kind you don't realize you've been denying yourself until it finally arrives. Later that morning, Diane helped me pack the clothes instead of making me hide them before checkout. That detail matters more than it sounds. No rushing. No stuffing things into the bottom of a suitcase like contraband. No erasing. Just folding. Normal, ordinary folding. A marriage is built or broken on 1,000 small gestures. Sometimes salvation looks like your wife smoothing a cardigan sleeve and asking if you remembered your pearl earrings. We're not some fantasy couple now. Let me be honest about that too. There are still moments when Diane gets sad about the lost years. There are still moments when I feel guilt so sharp it surprises me. We still haven't told everyone in our life. Maybe we never will. Maybe some things remain close, not because they're shameful, but because privacy and secrecy are not the same thing. That was another late lesson. Privacy says, this is mine to share carefully. Secrecy says, this must never be seen because I cannot survive the truth. Those are two very different lives. Now, if I want an afternoon to myself, I don't invent errands. I say so. If Diane has a hard day with it, she says so. If I buy something, we talk about whether it actually suits me instead of whether I can smuggle it into the house. And yes, I still make bad choices sometimes. A few months ago, I bought a blouse online that looked elegant on the model and made me resemble a decorative sofa when it arrived. Diane laughed so hard, she had to sit down. I laughed too. Then she said, at least now your fashion disasters are honest. That's marriage, I think. Not endless approval. Shared reality. If there's one thing I wish I had understood sooner, it's that the hidden side of me was never the real danger. The danger was building a life where the person closest to me could feel my tension but never know its name. The danger was letting fear write our marriage without giving love a draft. People often imagine transformation as the moment you put on the dress, or the wig, or the makeup. But that's not what changed me most. The real transformation happened in smaller, less cinematic pieces. When Diane asked how long, and I told the truth. When she stopped me from throwing everything away just to make the room easier for both of us. When she measured my shoulders and told me my size was reality, not wishful thinking. When she taught me that confidence starts in the body before it reaches the face. When we stood by dark water and the world failed to collapse. When she opened the curtains in that hotel room and said, there you are. That was the hidden side she finally saw. Not a costume. Not a joke. Not some secret life built to betray her. A frightened part of me that had spent years believing love could survive almost anything except honesty.
And I was wrong about that.
Honesty hurt us. For a while it hurt badly. But it also gave us a chance secrecy never could. A chance to know who was actually in the marriage. Sometimes I think about the man holding that heel in the bedroom when he heard the key in the front door. The panic.
The shame.
The certainty that everything was over. I feel tenderness for him now, which is not something I ever expected. Because he had no idea that the worst moment of his life was also the first truly honest day of his marriage. Not the easiest. Not the prettiest. Not the most graceful. But the first honest one. Diane says something now when she sees me hesitating in front of the closet. She says, are you deciding what feels like you, or what feels safest? That question reaches beyond clothes. I think a lot of us live inside it. Not just men like me. Anybody who learned to perform before they learned to speak. Anybody who became acceptable before becoming known. Anybody who confused silence with stability. There's a reason this story happened after 43 years, and not 4. Fear ages with you if you feed it. It becomes respectable. It wears routines. It pays bills. It fixes gutters. It attends parent-teacher conferences and retirement parties and neighborhood barbecues. It learns how to look like reliability. But deep down, it is still fear. And eventually, usually when you least expect it, somebody you love opens the door. If that ever happens to you, I hope 2 things are in the room. Truth. And enough tenderness to survive it. Diane once asked me whether I regretted her finding out the way she did.
I thought about it for a long time.
Then I said, I regret the years that made it happen that way. I don't regret being known now. She nodded and said, good. Because I'd rather live with something difficult and true than easy and incomplete. That's probably the sentence our marriage stands on now. Difficult and true. Not perfect. True. So, if you've watched this far, I want to leave you with something honest. The hidden side my wife finally saw wasn't just the clothes. It was the part of me that had spent a lifetime waiting for permission to be gentle, expressive, uncertain, and visible without apology. The clothes were only the doorway. What was on the other side was a whole human being who had been edited down for so long he almost forgot his full shape. And maybe that's the part that stays with me most. Not that I was caught, that I was finally seen. If someone you love trusted you with a truth they had hidden for decades, what do you think would matter more to you? The secret itself, or the years it took them to say it out loud? I'd really like to know your answer.